With the unit circle, we put angle measurements on the inside. So we start over here at the positive x-axis, which is 0 degrees. Go all the way around would be 360 degrees. Halfway around would be 180 degrees. At the very top would be 90 degrees. The bottom would be 270. And then within each quadrant, halfway in the middle is 45 degrees. 135 in the second quadrant. Third quadrant would be 225. Fourth quadrant would be 315. Then we also have a 30-degree measure along with a 60-degree measure in the first quadrant. Second, we'd have 120, 150. Third quadrant, we'd have 210, 240, 300, and 330 in the fourth quadrant. Now we can do the same thing on the circle, but with radian measure. So again, we start over on the positive x-axis, which is 0 radians. All the way around is 2 pi. Halfway around is 1 pi. At the very top would be half a pi. And at the bottom would be 1.5, or 3 pi over 2. Then in the middle of each quadrant we have 1/4 of a pi, 3/4 of a pi, 5/4 of a pi, and 7/4 of a pi. Now to get to the last spots in radian measure, 30 degrees is 1/6 of 180. So we got pi over 6. If we go to 60, we get 2/6, which reduces into 1/3 pi. 90 is 3/6. 120 would be 4/6, which would simplify into 2/3 pi. 5/6. 6/6 is pi. 7/6. 8/6 would reduce into pi over 3. 9/6 is equal to 3 pi over 2. 10/6 would reduce into 5/3. And 11/6 is equivalent to 330. So there's all your angle measurements in degrees and radians. Now, we call this a unit circle because every point on this circle is 1 unit from the origin. So this point over here is at 1, 0. On the left, it would be at -1, 0. At the very top, we'd have 0, 1. And at the very bottom, we'd have 0, -1. Now, every coordinate point, x, y, represents the cosine and the sine of that angle. So let's go to 30 degrees, and I'm going to draw a 30, 60, 90 triangle. There's my 30, here's my 60. And then our ratios are square root of 3 to 1 to 2. So if we start with the cosine of 30 degrees, adjacent over hypotenuse, we have square root of 3 over 2. And then the sine would be opposite over hypotenuse, 1 over 2. Well, based upon symmetry, this point over here would be the same thing, except for the x value is negative, the y value is positive. And based upon symmetry, this coordinate point would be the same, except for it would have a negative y value. And then lastly, this point in the third quadrant would be the same, except for they're both negative. Now if we go to 60 degrees, the cosine of 60 is 1/2. And the sine of 60 degrees is opposite over hypotenuse, square root of 3 over 2. Based upon symmetry, this coordinate point would be the same thing, except for the x value is negative. Based upon symmetry, this would be the same thing, except for the y value is negative. And in the third quadrant, they're both negative. if I draw a 45, 45, 90 triangle, our ratios of our legs is 1 to 1, and the hypotenuse is square root of 2. Therefore, the cosine is equal to root 2 over 2, and the sine is equal to the same thing. Based upon symmetry, we get that point, this point with a negative y value, and this point with a negative x and a negative y value. So then the last thing to discuss is the tangent value. And tangent equals sine divided by cosine. Therefore, if we take the sine and divide by the cosine, at 0 degrees, we just get 0. At 90 degrees, if we take the sine and divide by the cosine, we get 1 divided by 0, which we cannot do. At pi, 0 divided by negative 1 is 0. And at 3 pi over 2, negative 1 divided by 0, we cannot do. It's undefined. Now if we go to 30 degrees, tangent of 30 is 1 over the square root of 3, which rationalizes into square root of 3 over 3. Based upon symmetry, we have the same value over here, but negative. Based upon symmetry, we have the same value down here, except for negative. And the third quadrant has a positive tangent value. And at 45, our tangent value is equal to 1 over 1. Negative 1 in the second quadrant. Negative 1 in the fourth. Positive 1 in the third. Then if we go to 60 degrees, tangent's opposite over adjacent, so that would be square root of 3 over 1. So there is the unit circle completed with sine and cosine and tangent values, along with angle measurements in degrees and radians.